Let's talk about what brings you to the U.S. right now. This deal for new submarines, submarine technology, defense sharing, all with an eye at keeping China checked as it continues its expansion in the Asian Pacific region. Can you tell me how you view China in terms of whether it is a strategic threat to the UK?
You know, today we actually published our integrated review, which is our approach to foreign policy and security policy. And it makes the point that the behavior that we've seen from China over recent time is concerning. They're acting more in a more authoritarian fashion at home, more assertive overseas, and they represent a systemic challenge to the world order as we know it, and also a country with fundamentally different values to ours. So I think the right response to that from countries like the UK, the US and other allies is to be robust in defending our interests, standing up for our values and taking the necessary powers that we need to do that. So,
is China a threat?
China represents the biggest state threat to our economic interests, for sure, and is a systemic challenge for the world order. Now, that's why it's important that we take steps to protect ourselves against that. So in the UK, we've recently blocked hostile investment in sensitive sectors like semiconductors. That's an important thing to be doing. And we will continue to do what is necessary to keep our country safe.
What kind of signal did the balloon that overflew the U.S. send? And by the way, did you see a balloon in the UK, whenever any of your facilities or cities?
Yeah, I think the balloon incident here was an example of that behaviour that I talked about that is concerning. Whether it's the balloon incident, whether it's how China's behaving in the South China Seas, those are all examples of a regime that is acting in a way that is not aligned with the values that we share between the US, the UK, Australia and other allies. So it's important that we're aligned in our approach to China, which we are. I think if you look at the UK's approach, it's very similar to the approach that the US is taking. It's being robust in standing up for our values, protecting our interests, and engaging with China where it makes sense to do so, because obviously it is a very large economy. It's a country which has influence and impact on the world at large, and whether it's tackling things like climate change or macroeconomic stability, there will be engagement, of course.
The US is concerned that China may provide weapons to Russia with regard to the Ukraine war. If that were to happen, what should the response be?
That would be a very worrying and dangerous development. And I think the strong message that the UK, the US and all countries have said to China, but to any country, is not to support Russia in this conflict. They are clearly an aggressor. They have broken the law. What they're doing is appalling, and no other countries should be trying to support them. And actually, another country we could call out in that regard is Iran, that has been supplying Russia with UAVs, with drones. That's wrong, and that's why actually when it comes to Iran, we've put sanctions on particular actors.
Would you support sanctions against China?
I think with sanctions, it's always something that is best done coordinated with allies, because for sanctions to be effective, we have to do them together. So when it comes to sanctions, we've always had that dialogue with partners like the US and others in Europe. But we want to send a strong signal to people that they should not support Russia. And that's why our efforts diplomatically to isolate Russia are important and have, to this point, been successful. And you've seen that in the United Nations with the resolutions that we've been passing with very strong and broad support. But the strong message I'd say to the international community is continue to isolate Russia, because what they're doing is illegal, it's wrong, and provide support to Ukraine quickly, because with that they can really make a breakthrough in this war and bring this conflict to an end.
You have suggested that everything is on the table when it comes to defending Ukraine. UK stepped forward with tanks, longer range missiles. Do you draw the line at fighter jets, or is that still in the cards as far as you're concerned?
I think it's important right now that we accelerate and intensify our support to Ukraine. And the reason I say that is because they have an opportunity to have a decisive advantage on the battlefield if they're given the right support. And that's why we've led an effort to provide extra capabilities, heavy tanks, longer range fires, more air defense. And what we want to do is to ensure that Ukraine can win. And that means over the next few months, giving them the support to try and break through, have a successful counteroffensive against Russia. That should be the priority right now. Obviously, the UK, the US have led the effort in supporting Ukraine, and that's the right thing to do.
There's a belief that's been expressed in this country that Putin is playing the long game. He's playing the game of hoping that patience runs thin in the West. Do you think that's the case?
I think he's continually been disappointed. He thought this would be over in a matter of weeks. It isn't, and it wasn't. And he also, I think, underestimated the degree of unity that he would find from all of us supporting Ukraine. I mean, this is an alliance of so many countries that has stayed together for over a year and will continue to do so, providing a huge amount of support to Ukraine, but also putting in place an economic sanctions package, the likes of which the world has never seen, to tighten the economic vice on the Russian economy, and also isolating Russia diplomatically. We've managed to sustain very strong support in the international community, in the United Nations, condemning Russia's action. We just saw another UN resolution pass a few weeks ago, demonstrating that breadth of support. And I think Putin has been surprised by all of those things.
A new prime minister, a new monarch. What's your relationship like with King Charles?
I mean, I was his first appointed prime minister, actually. I think people may not realize in the UK that the convention is you actually go and ask the monarch for permission to form a government, and it's not until that moment that he or she says that that you're actually prime minister. So that moment where I went to do that was obviously something that I'll never forget. It's a very special moment in my life, and now I have the privilege of sitting down with him every week. We have something called an audience, a weekly audience, where I sit down with him. And
good discussions?
Great discussions. But the long-standing convention is that no prime minister comments on the content of those discussions, of course. So I can't say any more than that. But it's a real privilege.
And I understand that. But I think, he's trying to modernize the monarchy. You're trying to bring more tech into the UK's economy. Are you kindred spirits on some level?
I think, look, actually, King Charles is someone who issues that politicians and governments are grappling with have been issues that he's been talking about for a long time, particularly climate change, where he's been very passionate about that topic, and everyone knows he has a very long-standing interest in it, and many of the things that he's been talking about for a long time, we're all now talking about. So I think he's someone who speaks with enormous authority when it comes to that topic in particular. But I think, look, I see him do the job. He's someone who absolutely is someone who wants to represent everybody. And I've seen that from all the interactions that I've had with him. He takes that side of his job really seriously. When I've been out and about with him, I've seen that connection he has with people from all walks of life. That's very special. And I think the monarchy is something that we're obviously very proud of in the UK. As Prime Minister, it's a great privilege to champion all our British institutions, our culture, our history, our values around the world, but particularly the monarchy.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.